Slow down a second, this your ride. That is the first thing I heard before I even really saw him, just that voice behind me in the parking lot, sharp and already halfway to a verdict. And in that split second, I had no idea that those few minutes with one cop and one car were going to cost his department almost $2 million and cost me a kind of safety I am still trying to get back. You know what I mean. My name is Donald Eastston. I am an architect, a kid who grew up at the bottom of the barrel, and somehow ended up drawing buildings for a living, signing contracts, hiring staff, paying taxes on numbers my younger self could not even imagine. But that day, in the Whole Foods parking lot, none of that mattered. I was just a black man standing next to an orange Lamborghini, and to that officer, those two things did not belong in the same picture. So let me take you back a bit so this whole thing makes sense. I was born in 1988 in South Central Los Angeles, back when helicopters were basically the neighborhood lullaby and sirens were the alarm clock. My mom was a nursing assistant who worked double shifts. My dad left when I was 4, and my earliest memory of money is watching my mom stare at a stack of bills and then forcing a smile when I walked into the kitchen. She used to tell me, "Baby, you are going to have to work twice as hard to get half as far. That is not fair, but that is real." And the way she said it, you could tell she hated that sentence and believed it at the same time. When I was 7, I drew this building for a class assignment, not just a house, an actual building, a community center with a rooftop garden, big windows, a gym, classrooms, a place where kids like me could exist without always watching the door. My second grade teacher, Ms. Reynolds, looked at it and said, "Donald, you know you could be an architect, right?" And I remember thinking, I do not know what that is, but it sounds like somebody who gets to decide what the world looks like. Fast forward to 2006. Somehow I get into USC School of Architecture on a partial scholarship. I walk into the orientation studio and there are 85 students and only 3 of us are black. First week, a white classmate asks if I am there on some kind of affirmative action program. Like the only way I could walk through the same door as him was if someone lowered the bar. You feel that in your chest, even if you laugh it off in the moment. And the whole time I am juggling classes and work while other kids are pulling all-nighters and then sleeping till noon. I am doing all-nighters in studio, then opening the campus bookstore at 6 a.m., then running back to critique sleep was optional. Rent was not. In my 3rd year, I did a project for affordable housing I built in green spaces, community areas, little details that came straight out of my own childhood wishes. My professor, a guy who designed museums for billionaires, looks at my work and says, "Pretty complex. You sure someone with your background can pull this off?" He says it like he is complimenting me, but we both know what he means. My background. Black, poor, wrong, zip code, wrong, side of statistics. And I remember my mom's voice in my head, twice as hard, half as far. So I took that comment and I used it like fuel. I refined that design until my hands were shaking from caffeine and stubbornness. And at the end of the year, I won the departmental thesis award. Same professor shook my hand like he had never doubted me. That is how it goes, right? They question you on Monday and clap for you on Friday like it is 2 different people. I graduated in 2011, right into the teeth of a recession that chewed up the architecture industry pretty good between 2011 and 2015. I bounced through 3 different firms, and at each one the pattern was the same. At the first firm, I kept getting passed over for project lead roles that went to white colleagues with less experience and thinner portfolios at the second. A senior partner called me into his office before a client meeting and told me I might want to soften my appearance. Maybe shave the beard, change the haircut, wear lighter colors, make myself less threatening, less black. That is what he meant. And at the third firm, I watched a white coworker present my design concept to a major client as if it was his same drawings, same model, my work, his name. When I brought it up, I was told I was being too sensitive and I needed to be a team player. And after a while, you start to realize it does not matter how many fancy offices you walk into. Some people will always see you as the intern who should be grateful to be sitting at the table. In 2016, I hit a wall. I was tired of swallowing it, tired of making myself small. So I did what you are not supposed to do when you grew up with money. Fear, I quit. I took $12,000 in savings, a used laptop, a borrowed desk in my garage, and I started Eastston Design Group. My first client was a college friend who needed a restaurant renovation. Then another friend needed an office build-out. Then somebody on a neighborhood council called, and slowly it grew. By 2020, I had 15 employees. We had completed over $30 million worth of projects. And the thing I was most proud of was that a lot of those buildings were in underserved communities, beautiful, functional spaces, in places that were used to getting whatever was cheapest I was trying to prove. You did not have to choose between equity and excellence. You could build something that treated people with respect, even if their zip code did not impress investors. So when March 2023 rolled around and I walked into a dealership and saw an orange Lamborghini Urus sitting there like a cartoon on wheels, something in me said, "Why not you?" Not the humble part, not the careful part, the kid part, the one that used to press his face to the bus window and stare at houses on the hills. I did not need that car. My Camry still ran just fine, but I was tired of living like everything in my life had to be practical and apologetic. I paid $185,000 cash, signed the paperwork, and when I drove it off the lot, I felt this wild mix of joy and defiance, like I was finally allowing myself to be seen. My mom saw a picture and called me that night. She said, "That is a lot of car, baby." And I laughed and told her I earned every penny. She said, "I know you did. Just promise me you will be careful." And if you grew up black in America, you know exactly what she meant without her having to explain a single word. On June 14th, 2023, I had one of those long days that make you feel like you are actually building something. We had just landed a major contract for a mixed-use development in Englewood housing retail green space. One of those projects that can change the feel of a neighborhood. I worked about 12 hours. Then around 3:47 p.m., I pulled into a Whole Foods in Calabasas to grab salmon, asparagus, a bottle of wine. Nothing dramatic, just dinner. I was in a navy polo and khaki pants, looking exactly like what I was. A tired professional grabbing groceries on the way home. I walked the aisles, people smiled. A teenager asked me if I knew where the gluten-free pasta was. It was so normal it almost felt like a commercial. Then I walked out to the parking lot, hit the unlock button, and the Urus chirped and flashed its lights. I started loading groceries into the trunk. First bag, second bag, and that is when I heard the footsteps behind me and that voice. "All right, let us slow down a second. This your ride." I turned and saw the uniform, the badge, the gun on his hip, his cruiser blocking my car in like I might make a run for it with the salmon. His hand was resting near his weapon, not grabbing it, just close enough that every cell in my body took notice. "Yes, sir," I said. "It is my car. I just finished shopping." I kept my voice level and polite, hands visible, because I had that talk with my mom when I was 12, the one about how to survive a police encounter. When your skin color reads as threat. I offered him my keys. My registration told him my license was in my wallet and asked if he wanted to see it. He looked me up and down and gave this little scoff like he just stepped in something and said, "And you expect me to believe you own a Lamborghini SUV like this?" There, it was not even hiding. Not "what did you do for a living?" Not "is everything okay?" Just straight disbelief that someone who looked like me could legitimately own something like that. "I do not expect anything, officer. I said I have the keys. The registration is in my wallet. You want to see it?" He took the license and registration, glanced at them, then said, "Keys do not prove much. People borrow things. Registrations can be faked. Just hang tight and do not touch anything else." He walked back to his cruiser, left me standing there with the trunk open, ice cream starting to melt, and every minute that passed felt heavier. A white woman loading groceries into a Mercedes a couple spaces over. Looked at me, looked at him, then looked away, like she had changed the channel. A few people pulled out their phones and started recording from a safe distance. Nobody said anything. He runs the plates, calls dispatch, and after a while they come back and confirm exactly what I already knew. 2023 Lamborghini Urus registered to Donald Easton, Santa Monica address. No wants, no warrants, clean record, DMV photo matches. That should have been the end of it. Right? That is the part in the story where a reasonable person says, "Sorry to bother you, have a good day." But that is not what happened. He came back and said, "So whose car is this really?" "Mr. Easton." I told him again. It was mine. Pointed out that dispatch had just confirmed it was registered to me. He shrugged it off and said, registration could be faked and ID could be stolen. Said he was going to need proof of purchase, standing in a parking lot with groceries sweating in my trunk, being told to produce a bill of sale for my own car. I remember asking, "What exactly are you investigating here?" And he said, "I am conducting an investigation." Like that word investigation was a magic spell that meant he did not have to answer any more questions. I asked again, "An investigation into what crime?" And that is when he went quiet, because there was no crime. There was only the crime of existing while black in a high-end parking lot. 16 minutes into this mess, a second patrol car pulls up. A sergeant steps out. A woman who has clearly been doing this a while. She asks him what is going on. He tells her. "It is a possible stolen vehicle." Says he is not buying my story. She asks if he ran the plates. He says yes, they came back to me. She asks if the ID matches. He says yes, and starts to say something about it being suspicious that someone like me owns this car, and she cuts him off. She turns to me and apologizes, says I am free to go, tells him to get back in his car, and just like that, it is over for them. They drive away. Shift continues paperwork. Maybe nothing changes, but I am standing there loading the rest of my groceries into the trunk with my hands shaking not from fear anymore but from anger because I did everything right, and it still was not enough to buy me the basic assumption of innocence that other people get for free. I went home, put the groceries away, tried to eat dinner, could not that night. I sat on my couch replaying that body language, that tone, those words you expect me to believe you own this. And what broke in me was not ignorance. I have seen plenty of that. What broke was the last little bit of hope that success could insulate me, that if I worked hard enough, played by all the rules, stacked enough accomplishments, I would finally be safe. Yeah, that died in a grocery store parking lot at 4 p.m. on a Thursday. For 3 days I tried to let it go. Told myself it was just one cop. Told myself I was lucky it did not escalate, but I could not sleep. I would wake up at 3 a.m., hearing his voice in my head, and finally I did something my younger self never would have thought to do. I fought back the way the system understands. I called a lawyer. 2 years earlier at a networking event, I had met a civil rights attorney named Maya Chen. She specialized in police misconduct cases, the kind of person departments know by name. I called her, told her what happened, told her I was not sure if I was overreacting. She said, "Send me whatever you have and we will talk the day after the incident." I had filed a public records request for the body cam footage because some part of me knew I might need receipts. When the city finally emailed the files, Maya and I sat in her office and watched the entire interaction. From the officer's perspective, we watched him pull in behind me. We heard the tone. We saw the moment. Dispatch confirmed the car was mine and watched him keep pushing anyway. When it was over, she leaned back, looked at me and said, "That is textbook racial profiling. No reasonable suspicion, no articulable crime. He stopped you because you are black and the car is expensive," and then she got to work. She filed more public records requests, not just for my stop, but for all of Officer James Coleman's traffic stops over the past 5 years, for body cam footage, for demographic breakdowns, for his personnel file, for any complaints, any bias training he had done when the data came back. It painted a picture that went way beyond me. 847 stops in 5 years, 72% of them Black or Latino drivers. 49% involving vehicles valued over $50,000. Of the luxury vehicles he stopped, 89% had black drivers behind the wheel, and out of those 847 stops, only 23 resulted in arrests or citations. That is a 2.7% hit rate. He was not a crime fighter. He was a fisherman casting the same net over the same communities again and again and almost never pulling up anything but resentment. On top of that, Maya found 12 separate internal complaints alleging racial bias against Coleman, all of them dismissed as unfounded or not sustained. She found emails and group texts where he and other deputies joked about black men in fancy cars. She found training slides that listed young minority males in high-end vehicles as an incongruent driver. Profile basically teaching officers to treat people who look like me as a walking red flag. The problem was not just one guy with bad instincts. It was an entire culture normalizing his behavior. On July 29, 2023, we filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against Officer Coleman and the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Unlawful detention, racial profiling, failure to train and supervise the case hit local news, then national. The body cam footage went viral. People watched that 16-minute clip of me trying to convince a man with a gun that I belonged next to my own car. And the comments were exactly what you would expect. Some people saying, "This is outrageous." Others saying, "He is just doing his job. If you have nothing to hide, why are you nervous?" And that right there is the gap. If you have never had to think about whether a traffic stop could be the last thing you do, you are living in a different country than I am, even if the zip code is the same. The department put out a statement about taking allegations seriously and placed Coleman on administrative leave. Internal Affairs interviewed him. Maya deposed him under oath, asked him what someone who could afford a Lamborghini looks like in his mind, he said. He did not understand the question. She walked him through his own numbers. 47 luxury vehicles stopped in 5 years, 41 driven by black men, 6 by Latino men, 0 by white men. Asked if that seemed proportionate, he kept falling back on instinct, experience, hunches, until finally it was clear his instinct was just another word for bias. In December 2023, the county came to the table with a settlement offer $150,000 and a promise to implement new anti-bias training. Maya told me about it and then said, "I do not think you filed this for the money," and she was right. If I had taken that quick settlement, I would have gotten a check and they would have gotten to tuck the problem back under the rug. So we said no, we went to trial. The trial started March 4, 2024 in federal court downtown. And if you want the twist in this story, here it is. The judge overseeing the case was the same woman who had been my second grade teacher, the one who told me I could be an architect. Life has a sense of humor, right? She could not show any reaction from the bench, but just knowing she remembered that kid who drew the community center made me feel like I was not walking into that courtroom alone. On the stand, I told the jury about my life about South Central, my mom's warning, USC, the late nights, the microaggressions in every stage of my career. The decision to start my own firm, the buildings we had designed, the communities we had served. When Maya asked why I bought the Lamborghini, I told them the truth. I bought it because I wanted it, because I worked for it, and because I was tired of making myself smaller, so other people could feel comfortable. When she asked how it felt to stand in that parking lot with melting groceries while someone tried to strip me of my own success, I said it felt like spending 15 years climbing a mountain and then having someone stationed at the top whose only job is to push people like you back down no matter how carefully you climbed. We brought in a sociologist who explained things like implicit bias and driving while black. She showed charts of Coleman's stop patterns, how his hit rate was way below department averages, how his stops concentrated heavily on black drivers in expensive cars. She translated the numbers into simple language. He is not following crime. He is following a stereotype. The defense tried to argue Coleman was just doing his job, that he was allowed to investigate suspicious circumstances, but they could not explain the pattern. They could not explain the group texts or the training slides without admitting that the suspicion was racial from the jump. On March 22nd, the jury came back. They found Coleman and the department liable for unlawful detention and racial profiling. They awarded $750,000 in compensatory damages and $1.2 million in punitive damages total. $95 million. 3 days later, the sheriff's department announced that Coleman had been fired and rolled out a package of reforms: mandatory implicit bias training every 6 months, public reporting and quarterly audits of traffic stop data, review flags for any officer whose stops showed racial disparity, body cameras required for every interaction, and on paper that looks like justice, right? Guy does wrong, guy gets fired, department pays, policies, change story over, except it is not over. Not for me. I got the verdict, I got the check, I got the headlines, but I also got this permanent little spike in my chest every time I see police lights in my mirror. I still drive the Urus. My mom asked me once if I wanted to sell it, and I said no, because then they win. But I would be lying if I said I do not brace myself for a second every time I started in a public lot. Before all this, it was just a car. Now it is a symbol, a target, a reminder, depending on the day. A few months after the trial, Architectural Digest did a feature on a community center my firm designed in Watts rooftop gardens, floor-to-ceiling windows, kids running around in spaces that looked a lot like the drawing I did when I was 7. They asked me about the lawsuit, and I told them this. They tried to make me feel like I did not deserve what I had earned, but I know my worth. The car is just metal and glass. My dignity is mine, and no badge gets to take that away. That is the part that keeps me going, that refusal to internalize their shame. So now I want to ask you, whoever you are on the other side of this screen, what do you see when you watch a story like this? Do you see one bad cop? Do you see a broken system? Do you think $95 million and a fired officer is justice? Or is it just a band-aid on something deeper? If you are black or brown, and you have been stopped for the crime of existing in the wrong car in the wrong neighborhood, I would really like to hear your story. And if you are not, I want you to think honestly about whether you have ever assumed someone did not belong next to what they had, a house, a car, a job, just because of what they looked like. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Argue with me, argue with each other. Talk about where you think the line is between reasonable policing and pure bias. Because staying quiet is how this stuff keeps going. And if my 16 minutes in that parking lot can turn into a conversation that makes even a few people look at themselves and this system differently, then maybe, just maybe, something good comes out of all that garbage.